Hello, everyone. What are we going to be talking about today? Well, I'm going to give you a hint. Some women are surviving on caffeine all day or scrolling all night. They're overwhelmed. They're not getting a whole lot of sleep. That's what we're going to be talking about. What you think about that, Dr. Angela?
Well, I think it's a great topic to talk about today because, from a medical perspective, we now know that poor sleep affects almost every of the major systems in the body: hormones, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your mood, and even increases your risk of dementia.
Wow, that's a lot. So we got a lot to talk about today. So welcome to Be Well Sistas. So let's dive right into it. So let's talk about why sleep matters. I want to start off by just talking about why women have gotten so used to not sleeping. They've normalized it. We talk about it all the time like it's a badge of honor. We're caregivers. A lot of us is in that sandwich generation where we're not just taking care of our kids. Even when our kids are grown, we're still dealing with that, the grandkids. And now we're dealing with parents and family members who have grown old, who are depending on us. And at the end of the day, we're not getting any sleep. And what's the result of all that? Weight gain. We don't have any energy, inflammation, brain fog, mood swings, and the list goes on and on. So let's talk about what are we going to do about it?
Well, one of the things I often tell my patients is you can't cheat sleep. And
That's
so,
a big
Sharon, we talked before about your health being your wealth. And a lot of times I think people think because they feel like they can operate on little sleep, they think they're fine, right? But what they don't realize is that sleep can affect things long term, right? It can increase your blood pressure, it can increase your insulin resistance, increase your risk of heart disease, fluctuate your hormones, cause hormone regulation issues. It can make you more susceptible to menopausal symptoms, and it can affect your memory and your cognition. And so, how much sleep do we actually need is the question, right? And the answer is between 7 and 9 hours of sleep every night. 7 to 9 hours. Now, it's important not to get too little sleep, but also not to get too much sleep, because if you get too little, that can increase your risk of stroke. And if you get too
absolutely.
much, that can also increase your risk of stroke. So it's really important to get just the right amount between 7 and 9 hours sleep. Now, if you are chronically sleep deprived, one of the things that can happen is you lose perception of that deprivation.
Wow.
Just like people who are chronically thirsty and don't drink enough water, over time they lose their sense of thirst. The same thing happens when we sleep. When we're chronically deprived, like most of the population is right now, after a while, your body loses sight of the fact that you're sleep deprived. And so you can't rely on how you feel, because sometimes that sleep deprivation is causing damage, even though you don't feel like it's a problem. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the areas specifically that are affected by sleep. Number one, in women, the menstrual cycle is affected. When you don't sleep, the stress hormones take over. And when stress hormones take over, they affect other hormones like your female hormones, your menstrual hormones, your sex drive, even libido can be affected.
Really?
Also, it could, yes, that can be affected. I have women come talk about those, issues with libido. Sometimes it's because they're not getting enough sleep, right? It can also affect your hot flashes, how many hot flashes you get, your night sweats, anxiety, mood changes. There's a reason why they use sleep deprivation as a torture tactic in the military.
I
You're
know
familiar
about
with
that.
that, right? And so, because when you don't sleep, just everything is worse. Your mood is bad. You get brain fog. And so, all these things can happen just from not getting enough sleep. And so, one of the things that I've found is that oftentimes sleep issues can be driven by hormonal issues and not just physical issues. And so, it's important to get hormones checked. It's also important to make sure that you're practicing good sleep hygiene, which we're going to talk a little bit more later. But bottom line, sleep is very important, and you can't cheat sleep.
I tell you what, Dr. Angie, you said a mouthful. Is there anything that's not related to not getting enough sleep? Just listening to you, I was thinking to myself, we're in trouble because we're not getting enough sleep. So let's make this practical. Why are some of the reasons why women aren't getting enough sleep? A lot of times we're dismissing the issue of sleep because we say we're getting older. right? And in our mind, we have been told you don't need as much sleep when you get older. That's not true. Midlife women feeling exhausted and wired, constantly moving, feel like we can't sit down and take a break. You know some of those people?
Maybe.
Sleep disruptions leading to sugar cravings. This is what I hear all the time. I have patients come in. It's like, God, help me with my cravings, please. I can't stop eating sugar. And they don't realize that sometimes it all boils down to them not getting enough sleep. See, research tells us the day after sleep deprivation, in other words, when you're getting 6 hours of sleep or less, you tend to eat about 500 calories more. That adds up over time, does it? When you have 3,500 calories makes up a pound, what's that, about a pound a week?
Yep, there
If
you
you're
have it.
consistently not getting enough sleep and you wonder why you've gained some weight, that may be the reason why. Then we have increased emotional eating when we're tired. It goes all back to the fact that when you don't get enough sleep, the body is not happy the next day. What would have rolled off your back the day before, it is not happening the day after haven't got enough sleep. So sleep is just one of those things that we absolutely got to stay on track with. So a lot of our evening routines get in the way, right? Even with menopause, we know that menopause can interrupt our sleep. But I tell my patients a lot of times we want to blame it all on menopause. But a lot of times it boils down to what we've done during the day that has interfered with our sleep. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too as well. So there's so many things that go into why we're not sleeping.
That's it, Sharon. And I'm so glad you mentioned menopause because I have to tell you, everything ain't menopause. Okay. Sometimes it's lack of sleep, sometimes it's other things, right? But there's a reason why most of my patients in midlife who come and ask me, how do I get healthier? A lot of times I don't start with diet, I don't start with exercise. The first thing I start with is looking at their sleep
I love
patterns.
it.
And so it's important that we're having this discussion today. Now, today, I would also like to talk a little bit about what actually happens when we sleep. Because until recently, sleep was a very mysterious thing. We didn't understand what happened during the sleep cycle. And I say the word cycle because your sleep is an actual cycle. And so now that we've got more sophisticated microphones and microscopes, we now know that during the sleep process, the brain is rinsing out abnormal proteins, protein waste products from the brain fluid, right? And so there's this system called the glymphatic system, not the lymphatic, but the glymphatic system. And that system helps to wash away protein waste products in the brain. So I want to talk about two types of protein in the brain. One is the beta amyloid protein. Now, beta amyloid is a very sticky protein that sticks to the brain tissue and forms plaques in the brain.
I
Now, plaques in the brain are not good,
know
right?
what that leads to.
Right, because plaques in the brain damage the neurons and it can lead to cognitive decline, which means it leads to Alzheimer's dementia, right? And so none of us want Alzheimer's dementia. And so while you feel like you can operate on 4 or 5 hours of sleep today or tomorrow, what's happening is the in the brain is that those protein plaques are forming and can increase your risk of dementia over time.
So let me clarify this for everyone because I need for them to hear this. Sleep can actually interfere with your cognitive decline.
Absolutely. And it can directly increase your risk of Alzheimer's dementia and other forms of dementia, including vascular dementia.
That's scary for a lot of us, isn't it?
It is. And there's another protein called the tau proteins. Now, the tau proteins, they form little tangles inside the brain, and those tangles wrap around the neurons and cause damage to the neurons as well.
Yep.
And tau proteins and beta amyloid proteins have both been linked to Alzheimer's. And so, one of the analogies I use with the brain sometimes is to think about it like a dishwasher cycle. Okay. So your brain is trying to rinse this waste out of your body, right? Out of your brain. And so, like with any cycle, when it's disrupted, it disrupts the process, right? And in most patients, it takes about an hour before this process even starts because it happens in the deep sleep, the deep
Yeah.
REM sleep. And so it's important to not just make sure you're getting sleep, but that fragmented sleep doesn't help, right? If you're going to sleep, waking up, going to sleep, waking up, you never get into that deep wave of sleep. You never get into that deep cycle that is necessary to clean those proteins out.
That's so interesting about REM sleep. We hear all the time about REM sleep, and we always think, I just got to get more REM sleep. And reality is, all the different stages of sleep are important in the things that the body does. But I think the biggest takeaway about what you were just saying when it comes to REM sleep, it's important that the length of sleep is important because REM sleep doesn't start to occur until later on in the night. So if you only get a few hours of sleep, you're not getting that restorative sleep, that rapid eye movement. And that's the time when the body's clearing away all that bad stuff.
That's right. And I just want to also mention that during the REM sleep, that's where we consolidate our memory. That's where we regulate our hormones. That's when the growth hormone is released. That's when the muscles are repaired. That's when our insulin sensitivity is managed. And then in the REM sleep, also we have our creativity. That's where the brain prepares us for creativity for the next day.
Unbelievable what the brain does in the middle of the night. I always tell people when I was writing my second book and one of the chapters is on sleep, I realized at that point that if you don't get enough sleep, it's affecting everything. And I don't know about you, but I've had those moments in life where I knew I could have done something a whole lot better if I had just got a lot of sleep the night before, right? I think young people in particular don't get the fact that how much sleep plays a role. Because when I was younger, I could stay up all night, at least I thought, right? And didn't need to sleep. But even then, I needed to sleep. But we need it so much more as we get older.
That's right. And it's so challenging now because we have a 24-hour society. Back in our day, everything went off at 11 o'clock. We didn't have the internet, we didn't have programming 24 hours. And so there weren't a lot of things competing with our sleep. But now we know having the television, looking at our phones at night, right? The blue light in our phones helps to keep us awake. Actually, it suppresses melatonin and other sleep hormones and actually causes us to be awake. And so at night, it's important to dim the lights and avoid being on your phones if you're about to go to bed. And so I usually recommend avoiding the phones at least 2 hours before you go to bed. Another thing that affects sleep is alcohol. Now,
They-
that's one of those things that's really kind of confusing because a lot of people say, well, alcohol helps me sleep better. It helps you go to sleep, it can knock you out, but it actually disrupts the REM sleep. And so
Absolutely.
alcohol is not good for sleep. So just know that. Also, caffeine. Obviously, caffeine is a substance that keeps us awake. Well, caffeine has a long half life. And so if you're going to drink caffeine, drink coffee, you want to make sure you don't do it past noon.
So the caffeine is interesting because I talk to patients all the time about the caffeine. In fact, they estimate that it has about a 5 to 6 hour half life. But think about that. If when you drink that caffeine for 5 to 6 hours, it's in your system, it's revving you up. But they go on to say that even beyond that 8 or 9 hours, you got about a fourth of that caffeine still there. So if you're trying to get some sleep at night, you might not want to touch that caffeine out there about noon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon to the max. So you're not sleeping, right? Because we know that most people are caffeine sensitive. There's a lot of people who say they're not, but research tells us there's a small amount of people who can drink caffeine before bed and not affect them. But for most of us, we drink too close to bedtime and we're not sleeping. And about that alcohol, that was an interesting one upon studying about alcohol and sleep is the fact that you feel like you've fallen asleep, but you never get into that deep sleep. You're always in stage one, that light sleep. So that REM sleep, you don't get to see. So you wake up feeling not refreshed at all, right? Drowsy. I guess that's part of what the hangover is, huh?
And Sharon, I have a record number of people now who are requesting sleep medication, not surprisingly, right?
Yeah.
And so, one of the things to note about some of the medications is that although most of them have good safety profiles for the most part, they can actually affect the stages of sleep and they can make you have less restful sleep or less of the deep sleep. And so it's important to know that even though you have your eyes closed all night and you may be asleep all night, you may not be getting the good quality of sleep that you need. And so it's important to know the sleep aids really should be your last resort, including things like melatonin over the counter, because melatonin might help you get to sleep. But once you use it repeatedly, it can actually suppress your own production of melatonin. So it's important if you're going to use
Yeah.
over the counter sleep aids to make sure you use it for a short time. How I recommend using it is just for a defined period, maybe like a week or 2 weeks,
Yeah.
just to get you back on cycle. Because again, the sleep wake cycle, it's a cycle. And so your body wants to adhere to that cycle on a nightly basis.
But I gotta say, one of the things I concentrate my patients on is how to make changes in the day to like sleep better. Because we know the issue with sleep aids. And there's some even discussion about how it may be affecting the brain negatively when you take it long term. And even melatonin. I don't know about you, when I take melatonin, it may help you get to sleep, but you wake up in the morning like like someone has been keeping you up all night. It's a weird feeling where you don't wake up refreshed even though you slept, right? So I don't go to that. One of the things we're recommending these days in small amount is magnesium glycinate. Even though magnesium glycinate is not a sleep aid per se, it helps to relax the muscles and therefore makes the sleep a little bit more restful. So trying some more natural things are a better way to do it. But our biggest problem while we can't sleep is the things we're doing before. I am guilty of that. Well, you know what the young people call doom scrolling? That's some of the things we're doing. We got the phone in the bed. I got to tell you, the sleep specialists are adamant about this. There is only two things that should be happening in the bed, and looking at the phone, the computer is not one of them, right? And so I try to keep those two things, as they said, to the bedroom, and everything else I leave out of the bedroom so you can get better sleep. They want to make sure that the bed for your brain is seen as a place to sleep and not a place for work or doing other things, watching movies and binging social media. I have patients who wake up in the middle of the night and the first thing they grab is a phone. That's the worst thing you can grab. As you were saying earlier about the blue light, once that light from that phone is emitted and your brain gets a sense of it, it's stimulated and it's not going to want to go back to sleep. So that's the worst thing you can do. Late night eating. I had a patient literally told me he couldn't sleep, so he got up in the morning. He was having a taste for bacon and eggs, so he got up and cooked breakfast in the middle of the night, ate the breakfast, and went back to bed. That
Wow.
would be a no, right? No eating in the middle of the night for so many
Yeah.
reasons, right? So let's face it, there's a lot of reasons why people are not getting enough sleep. And some of them sometimes are out of their control. I remember, I'm sure you do, when our kids were small, that night you lay there and you think, okay, finally, I got a night, I'm going to sleep well. And then you hear, mommy. So my heart goes out to young parents because we've been there and done that, right? Because you want to get good sleep, but there's so many things that interfere with it. So I don't want to take it lightly that everybody can go to sleep and get plenty of sleep because there's a lot of reasons why people aren't sleeping. One of the big ones for me that I notice with patients, and I don't know about you, but they're in pain, right? 1 out of 3 Americans live with chronic pain. So think about that. So they're having a hard time sleeping even through the pain. So there's a lot of things that's going on. I think what we're trying to get across to all of you is just important to sleep. So whatever the issue is that's keeping you from sleeping, I need for you to know your ultimate goal is to figure out how to overcome that because, Dr. Angel set it up for you very beautifully when we started. There are so many things that's going to go awry in your body if you don't get a decent amount of sleep.
That's right. You can't cheat sleep. And so I'm glad you mentioned some of the disorders because there are some disorders of sleep. And one of them you touched on is restless leg syndrome, and that's very common in women. And so it's a disorder where your legs are moving at night, and the movement of your legs actually stirs you to a more superficial state of sleep if it doesn't wake you up completely.
Right.
And so it's important to get those things diagnosed. And so when I have women who are having trouble sleep, I often refer them for a sleep study. And sometimes that sleep study can be done at home. Sometimes a sleep study needs to be done in a lab, in a sleep lab. But that's where we uncover disorders. Another really, really, really big disorder is sleep apnea. And
Right.
so sleep apnea is becoming so much more common now as people are gaining weight, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
the extra weight on your chest stimulates this disorder. It actually causes your chest wall to be heavier, to expand. And then also in the airway, it causes extra tissue, extra fat. We gain weight on the outside. We also gain weight on the inside. And so when we got that extra fat on the inside, it causes the airways sometimes to relax and then collapse on itself. And then that could cause us to stop breathing at night. And so some of the symptoms of sleep apnea include snoring. It includes daytime sleepiness when you
Yes.
wake up and you still feel tired. Now, I don't mean waking up after 4 hours. I mean waking up after the 7 to 9 hours and you're still tired. That's a sign of sleep apnea, right? And so it's important to get those things diagnosed because they can be treated. And so I recommend that any woman who's having daytime sleepiness, who snores, or who is having fatigue, particularly in the morning.
Yeah.
You go to sleep and you wake up and you're still just tired. I recommend everybody get a sleep study just for baseline to make sure you don't have sleep apnea.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people too as well to whoever your partner is, ask them, are you snoring? Because we're guilty as I'm not snoring.
That's
So
right.
ask the person if there's someone else in the bed with you,
Yeah,
ask them, am I snoring? Right? Because they don't even realize it sometimes. It's amazing how dangerous sleep apnea is. And I have patients who won't use their CPAP.
that's
It's
right.
uncomfortable. And I tell them, you got to go back and figure out how to get this right. Of course, we're going to deal with the weight too as well, because you set it up so beautifully about what happens when the person is overweight and what it's actually doing to their breathing and their airways. And if you're not getting enough oxygen, imagine what that's doing to the body overall. We got to go back to what's the purpose of sleep in the first place. So now, even if you're trying to get that amount of sleep, it's not quality sleep. So we're
That's
going to
right.
still have a problem.
That's right. And so I've looked at lots of sleep studies over my career. And one of the things that also happens in patients with sleep apnea is the oxygen level drops at night. And so I've seen oxygen levels down into the 60s, and normal is over 90, 90 to
That's correct.
100. And so when the oxygen level drops, that stuns the heart, it stuns the brain. The brain doesn't like having low oxygen. And so then that triggers you to wake up. And so your brain triggers these micro arousals throughout the night. You may not wake all the way up, but it can take you from deep sleep to superficial sleep. And so one of the other symptoms that I see in patients with sleep apnea is getting up and going to the bathroom often. Did you know that?
No, I
Yeah.
actually didn't.
It's not normal to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night.
Did y'all hear that?
It's not normal, okay? So now some people do have bladder issues. Let
Yeah.
me just put that out there. Some people have overactive bladder or small bladders or, just really less elastic bladder. So that's something separate. But some patients are diagnosed with sleep apnea simply by the report of getting up and going to the bathroom multiple times a night. And the reason why that is that when you're in that superficial state of sleep, now your body is aware that you have to go to the bathroom. But
Hmm.
when you're in deep sleep, your body should not be bothered by the fact that your bladder is full. You should be able to hold your bladder all throughout the night. And so that's another, not a specific sign of sleep apnea, but it's one of those sensitive ones that if we see that that's a pattern, then we do recommend that sleep study.
Yeah. That's so important. That's so important. I I would fathom 1 out of 4 patients who come in to see me have sleep apnea. It's absolutely unbelievable. So it's an issue, particularly in our community, and people don't take it as seriously as they should. They think what happened to was that Reggie White that died in his sleep due to sleep apnea, that was like a one-off, but know that it's very common. And even if it doesn't cause your death right away. The idea that you're losing oxygen is going to contribute to so many other issues as you age, right? So this thing about sleep is just so, so important to stay on track and making sure you get sleep. Now, I'm sitting here talking to you, but I got to tell you, I'm asked all the time when I do talks and lectures, you seem to, take care of yourself and do well. What is the one thing you don't do well? Dr. Angel, I got to tell you, every now and then it's sleep, right? The interesting thing is, it's not because I can't go to sleep and stay to sleep all night. I don't have to get up to go to the restroom. None of that. My issue is I just need to go to bed, right? I'm up writing, I'm up reading, I'm up, doom scrolling, right? Doing everything except going to bed. Me of all people who know that, right? I was listening to one of the top sleep specialists in the nation, and he did allude to the fact that there are some people who are morning people and there are people who are night people. And that is innate born in you genetically. But he still makes the point, whether you're a morning person or a night person, you still got to get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So if I'm used to, don't get on me here, going to bed between 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning, I know I have to sleep till 8, right?
Yes.
Because I'm going to bed so late. And so it's so important to know kind of what your cycle is. But for you who say I only need 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, no, I don't care who you are. The body doesn't work that way. You have got to get your sleep if you're going to be your best. And let me let you in on another little secret. We kind of hinted at it, but one of the reasons why you can't lose weight is because you're not getting enough sleep. It's a big part of what happens in the middle of the night. What the body does is that Dr. Andrew told you earlier, it's like a cleaning cycle in the middle of the night. It's a washing machine going to work to clear out all the bad stuff in your brain. And if you don't get that sleep, the body cannot heal itself.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And Sharon, I have to say, I have a lot of bedtime procrastinators, which is what I
Thank you
cause,
so much for calling me out.
and so what I usually tell my patients is start with the time you normally get up for work, or let's say the time that you have to get up. Start with that time and then subtract the 7 to 9 hours from there. And so if you have to get up at 7, then
That's correct.
midnight is not so bad.
Yeah,
11 to
absolutely.
12 is not so bad, but it all depends on what time you need to get up. And then also at night, it's helpful to start dimming the lights when it's time to go to bed. Start turning down the television, turning down loud noise, and trying to keep your sensory inputs to a minimum. And then on the opposite side of that, in the morning when you wake up, open your shades, turn the lights on, look up at the sky for a quick second, and let your brain see that flash signal of light saying, hey, it's wake time. And so sometimes you can use light and dark in that manner just to help train your body until your cycle is set.
So that's called a circadian rhythm, right? And you guys have heard of that before. They go on to say that actually what you do in the morning has a lot to do with how you sleep at night. So it's important that you get up, as you said, and expose yourself to the light. And some suggest even for 15 or 20 minutes. I'll let you in on a little something. Another condition that we didn't mention and hadn't talked about is something called SAD, seasonal affectiveness disorder. I have a mild case of it. I I believe the reason I have it is because I grew up in Florida and I had
Wow.
sunshine all the time.
Yes.
And when I was first diagnosed with this mild case of sleep apnea, guess where I was living? In our favorite city, Lansing, Michigan,
Oh, wow.
right? And I don't know if you know this, but Lansing, Michigan has been ranked the second cloudiest city in the nation. Did you know that?
Oh, I believe it. That's why I was so depressed when I was there. Yes.
So Dr. Angela grew up in
I
Lansing and we lived
went to high
there for a
school
few
and a
years
little
with
bit of
school.
college there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I had to get
yeah.
out. Sorry,
And,
Lansing.
and I got to tell you, no offense, Lansing, but that was a cloudy, cloudy city, right?
That's right.
And that's when I realized. And what SAD does is in the wintertime, it kind of makes you moody, bring down the mood, almost a little mild depression. You're moving a little bit slower. So for some of you who experience that in the wintertime, that may be what's going on. Vitamin D is so important to make sure that it helps with that. You remember vitamin D, that vitamin we talked about, the sunshine vitamin? How do you make vitamin D? By your exposure to sunlight. So you see why in Lansing we had so many problems, right? So I had to supplement vitamin D. So I find when I supplement vitamin D, and even in the wintertime, I use something they call a light therapy, a little light
Yes.
box
Yep.
that I sit by the bed in the morning and I expose myself to that light, mimicking the sun for about 15 to 20 minutes. And it's been a game changer,
That's
right?
awesome.
So there's so many things you can do to kind of help with sleep. Don't just assume that your sleep issues is something you're going to always live with, because understand this, regardless of what's going on, if you don't get enough sleep consistently, it's going to wreak havoc on your health.
Absolutely. That's
Mhm.
so important. So important. And I wanted to say one more thing about sleep apnea because I've had the fortune of finding sleep apnea in so many
Yeah.
people, right? And once you find it, you can do something about it, you can treat it. But you can only treat it when people are compliant with the treatments, right? And so I have the most resistance to that CPAP machine.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I have something to share
Oh,
with you, and I don't
okay.
think you know this about me. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea, honey. And I tell you, like, when I was diagnosed, I could have gotten diagnosed with 100 other things, but it was something about that sleep apnea that really just, I mean, I wasn't ready. I
Because you
was like,
saw it
this
all
is
the
not
time.
me.
Yeah.
This is what other people have. I don't do, you know, I just went through a whole thing. I was
We don't do
embarrassed. I didn't
symptoms.
share with anybody. It was just I was like, "The machine? What? I have to travel? I'm going to, Miami, Aruba, everything. I'm not trying to take that machine with me, you know?" So but once I saw the results of my study and my oxygen levels went down to like 67 when I was
Wow.
asleep. I realized, and then I had a trainer I was working
Mhm,
with in the morning
mhm.
doing exercise in the morning, and I just couldn't keep up. I was,
You're
short of
tired.
breath and tired and had the raccoon eyes. And, it was just really, I had this one picture of myself with raccoon. I literally looked like I was about to die.
Yeah.
And so when I saw, I was like, you know what, it's time to. So now I'm, completely compliant. I take it everywhere. Now I am working on getting a better bag for it because you're in the airport. Everybody say you got your CPAP. You're on blast at the
And there's
airport.
no
'Cause,
shame. Say, I am healthy with my
that's
machine.
right. I'm working on that.
I
Yeah,
love
but yeah, it's one of those things where if you have it, you need to treat it. But most importantly, you need to get diagnosed if you're having any of those concerning symptoms.
So I love it. You with your CPAP, me with my light therapy, right? But we're getting no sleep, thank
That's
you,
right. I'm
and
getting
get the
good sleep.
quality sleep
Oh,
because
yes.
of it.
I'm getting good quality
So,
sleep.
so wonderful. This thing about sleep, though, we're joking about the different things about it, but we know the importance of it. And I'm always fascinated how people don't realize what sleep does. I have a question for you, Dr. Angela. It's kind of like one of the issues about when we're in training in school for medical related things. When you were in medical school, did you get much training on teaching people about sleep?
Not at all. Not at all.
Mm.
And I'm glad you said that because I feel like there's certain industries and cultures that compete with sleep or that minimize the importance of sleep. Like in medical school, we worked like 90, 100 hours a week
Absolutely.
in residency and all that. And so they discouraged, I mean, not that they wanted us to not sleep, but we had so much work, we just couldn't get the sleep
Yeah.
in. I also find, and this is really interesting, a lot of my people in academia, my patients who work in academia, they tend to get less sleep and they think they can function on less sleep. Like I've had professors tell me, "Oh, I only need 4 hours of sleep a night." And
Yeah.
because they're up doing publications and all sorts of research analysis and things. I don't know what that's about, but there's certain
Need
industries
to
I
sleep.
find that where sleep is sort of minimized or poo-pooed as if it's not important. And I think that's something that we all need to recognize
Yeah.
that if you're in one of those industries that you need to make sure that, you're not believing the hype.
Yeah. Well, let's speak the truth about this, though. It's not just certain industries. As a nation, as a community, people who don't give 100 is seen as lazy,
That's right.
right? And not
Mhm.
pulling their weight. And we think by getting a few hours of sleep, it's a badge of honor.
That's right.
And we've got to change that narrative
That's
because
right.
it's literally killing us. And I think we've all had that moment, where Even myself, staying up all night and feeling accomplished because I got that thing done,
That's
but
right.
not realizing what it means to my overall health.
That's right. And, certain fields of study, like, for example, I have a student, my daughter is at Harvard. And, when
Wonderful.
she tells me she's pulling all nighters, I tell her, like, look, remember, sleep is your superpower. Like,
That is
you
correct.
might think
I
that you're
love that.
getting ahead by pulling that all nighter. But if you just go to bed and get some good sleep, you're going to be able to be way more effective and efficient the next day.
God, I think if people understood that, I have in my field as a diabetes specialist, I have a wonderful person who works for me, and I won't call her out her name, but as a certified diabetes care and education specialist, there's only 19,000 of us in the nation. And she's been trying to pass this exam and she's failed it 3 times. And what I said to her was, and it wasn't a pep talk, it was absolutely the truth. I said to her, you know more about diabetes than I do. You're brilliant at this. And she goes, maybe I'm just not a test taker. So I sat down with her one day and I said, so tell me, what's your process? And she said, I stay up most of the night studying and then I lie down for a few hours. And then she takes the test in the afternoon. I was like, that is the problem,
Wow.
right? Because if you don't know it by midnight, even before that, for the people who go to bed early, you're not going to know it. And you've got to get a good night's sleep. So I think that's been the game changer for knowing that you got to get that good night's sleep and then get up in the morning and take that test early, right? Those are the people who do the best. You wonder, you're thinking that people when you were in colleges and programs, they were smarter than you are. Absolutely what it is. They got their sleep.
That's
Right?
right.
They
That's
studied
right.
it,
Right.
but we weren't trained to go to bed. We spent a lot of time up all night, right? And then expecting to give our best the next day.
Right.
And you can't do it.
You can do
You
it.
can't do it. And particularly when you get older.
It gets worse when you get older. And remember that memory consolidation happens while you're sleeping.
Yeah.
So if you're not getting good sleep, that consolidation is not
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. You're not going to be able to do it. So
That's right.
much about who we are and how successful and how efficient we are. Sometimes it boils down to getting a good night's sleep.
That's right.
I wish I had learned that a lot earlier.
Same here. Same here. Well, I'm gonna make sure I get to bed on time tonight. How about you,
Yeah,
Sharon?
absolutely. That is my goal. I've having to keep me to that, but it's a work in progress, right?
That's right.
The goal is I know a lot of you in positions where you can't get to sleep. I mean, we understand. One of the things I want to mention is the idea. I read a report that asked the question, what is the most unhealthiest worker in the nation? So, you go back and forth, oh, who could that be? And my first thought was a truck driver,
That's
right?
what I thought.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's what I
just
would have
had that
thought.
thought.
And they boiled it down to a category, and here's what they said. The graveyard shift worker. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter what job you're doing, but if you work
yeah,
from midnight to 7, 8 o'clock in the morning,
that's it.
right?
Yeah,
And I think a lot of it has to do with circadian rhythm,
for
but
sure.
dealing with a lot of patients who work at night, I actually kind of think I've kind of keyed in on another little problem too as well. And once I got them to understand this, what I'm about to tell you, it improved their situation at least by 50 to 75%. You can't get around the fact that you're up at night when you should be sleeping. But what I realize is that there's simply one simple thing is they could realize and put into practice was a game changer. They had to realize that their night is now their day.
That's right.
So a lot of people who work at night, what they would do is they would eat dinner before they leave for work. And they'll go through the whole night and not eat at all or just snacking on something.
Hmm.
Then they'll get home at 7 o'clock in the morning. What do?
Eat the breakfast.
And then what do?
Go to bed.
Right? On a full stomach.
Right.
And then here's what gets interesting. The average graveyard shift worker sleeps for 3 or 4 hours. They get up, go through the whole day. And then right before it's time to go back to work, they'll
Go
lie
back to
down again
sleep.
for 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
Now, remember what we said earlier. The longer you sleep, the more time you spend in that wonderful REM sleep that helps to clean the brain. So if they're only sleeping in 2 or 3 hour increments, wow.
That's profound. That's exactly right. I mean, and so in people in that industry, one of the things I recommend is getting those blackout curtains and making sure that you're setting your timer. If you're off work during the day, that doesn't mean trying to get things done. That means that's time for you to
You sleep.
sleep. Yes.
Yeah, so important. But we get it. we get that it's not just simply as to go to bed, right? That may be my issue, but I do get for a lot of you, it's not that. But here's what I want to challenge you is that whatever your issue is, why you're not sleeping, figure out how to make it happen. Because ultimately, if you don't, that lack of sleep is going to affect your overall health and your longevity. And that's the thing we're here for, to help you to find ways to make sure that you have the best quality of life. And sleep is just as important in everything else we're going to talk about. And I would put it up in the top 5.
That's it. I agree. I agree. And if you're someone who's just trying to get healthier, don't start with diet and exercise. Start with sleep. Make sure your sleep is on point first. And once that's on point and together, then you go to the diet and the exercise. But it's
Yeah.
not even healthy to go and exercise when you're sleep deprived because you're more prone to injury when you're tired.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
again, sleep comes first, and sleep is your superpower.
I absolutely believe that. As you were saying that, I remember an incident when I was in the military, and for you who, in our audience who served in military, you know something about going out in the field. And even though I was Air Force, we didn't do that, all that crazy stuff. We had a time where we were out in the field for a week and, we out and amongst the stars, as I would love to say. When I got home, I was so tired because I didn't get a whole lot of sleep while I was out there. They had us on rotation where you sleep only so many hours and then you change up with someone else. I walked into my apartment and I'm standing at the door. And here's what's going on in my head. I'm starving, but I can't keep my eyes open. I am starving.
Wow.
I can't keep my eyes open.
Wow.
What do you think won out? Sleep.
Sleep. That's right.
I went into that bed and I laid across that bed. This is horrible, but down south we call it sleeping ready roll. And what ready roll means is sleeping with all your clothes on. I even had my boots on. And I must have slept for about 12 hours.
Wow.
Woke up and realized, oh, you kidding me? I'm
I'm
in my whole
hungry.
uniform. But no, I was still so tired. Got up, took a shower, got back in the bed, right? And I was only waking when someone was knocking at the door, wondering if I had made it back home. I got up, and of course, by then it's 24 hours. I couldn't believe how long I had went without eating. But I got to tell you, sleep, that was
Yeah.
one of those moments I'll never forget, that no matter how hungry I was, sleep was like, no, we're in charge today.
That's right.
Because that's how important it is for our body. So much goes on in the middle of the night.
That's right. I'm glad you said that. It's almost like the order of operations comes first,
Yeah.
then food. That's
Oh,
great.
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So much about what we're talking about. I want you to think about the little tasks that you can do to start to get closer to getting that sleep that you need. Even if you're not at that 7 to 9 hours, can you get 6, right? Can you get 6 consistently? Once you get there, start to move it up a little bit more. But know that your ultimate goal is to get that 7 to 9. Do not convince yourself that you can live off 4 hours. You have to understand how the body works. Everyone know at a basic core that the body's number one instinct is to survive. And if all you're going to give it is 4 hours, it'll live off that. Not the best, but it'll live off that, right? So don't think because you have trained your body to live off 4 hours that that's all it needs. You will see the results, the negative outcomes, if you do that consistently for a long time. So make sleep a priority. I want you to work on first. Let's talk about 10 things. We're going to go through the list, Dr. Angela, and you can kind of chime in here with them. But the biggest one is consistent sleep.
Yes.
What's interesting about the body is this. Even as we talked about earlier about people have different sleep cycles, some people are late nighters and some
I'm a
people,
morning person.
and there's our morning person over there, right? We love those morning persons. My husband is that morning person. He wakes up singing in the morning. Me, not so much, right? But at night, that's my time. I'm working on all cylinders, right? But what the body likes most is that 7 to 9 hours, but even more so is consistency.
That's right.
So if you go to bed at midnight, go to bed at midnight and get up at 7 or 8. If you go to bed at 9, go to bed at 9, but you cannot be all over the place. It does not like the inconsistency of sleep.
That's right. And I hear a lot of my patients complain of migraine headaches. Inconsistent sleep schedules can also contribute to migraine headaches. And so that's another thing. If you suffer from migraines, it could be that you're not getting enough consistent sleep at the same time.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, of course, in the medical field, we always fascinated when a patient would come in and complain about something going on with them. There could be tons of things that may be causing it, right? But a
Yes,
lot of times we overlook the fact that they're just not getting enough sleep
that's
and
right.
they're not getting that consistent sleep, which is so important. In fact, they recommend that if you get up at a certain time during the week, guess what? You need to do that on the weekend too as well. Now I'm guilty of that because on the weekend, I'm like, that is my time to sleep in, right? But the experts say, even on the weekend, wake up at that time that you
That's right.
normally would.
That's right. Keep it consistent.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about the morning sunlight, as we said. So that's that other part that I want you to think about too, as well. So if you do nothing else, get up in the morning and let yourself see the sun. You know, on the divine level, I was telling someone that when it comes to sunlight and the ocean, both of us love Aruba, right?
Yes.
And when it comes to sunlight and water, there's something magical, something divine about being out in that, right?
Mhm.
No matter what's going on with you, when you see that sun and that water, it's like the body just responds and it's just the most beautiful feeling. I don't
Yes.
know why I can go to Aruba and be there for a week and not have any concerns at all. And soon as you hit the ground,
That's right.
back in Maryland, and now all of a sudden,
Stress.
yeah, the stress of it all, right?
Yes.
But in the morning, just give yourself that morning light. See that sun. Let it hit your face for a few hours, excuse me, a few minutes in the morning.
Yeah, that's great. And even better, if you can
Mm.
move your body outside, that's even better. Going for a nice walk in the early morning hours when the sun's just coming up, that's also good for your body and it's good for your sleep. When you tire those muscles out,
Ah,
it helps
yeah,
you sleep better.
yeah, yeah,
Also, I'm glad you talked about late night eating. That's a
yeah.
no-no because when your body is digesting food at night, all that rumbling of your intestines and your stomach can actually keep you from getting into deep sleep.
Yeah, and no, as we just explained, why do you not eat late? We just told you there's all these different processes the body must do in the middle of the night to keep you well. And digesting food is not one it needs to
No.
be doing.
Mhm.
So I actually recommend my patients, if possible, and of course, depending on your health condition or what medication you're taking, this may change, but try not to eat anything within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime. Give that gut a rest so when you approach sleep, the body can concentrate just on the things it's required to do in the middle of the night. So stay away from that late night eating. No getting up in the middle of the night and cooking breakfast.
And make sure you cut that caffeine off early, before noon if possible. It's okay to have caffeine for most patients, but you don't want to have it in the afternoon, and you certainly don't want it disrupting your sleep.
And again, the one I love to remind you of, the bed is only for two things, right? Okay.
Right.
Do not turn on that TV. Do not pull out that phone. Only sleep and sex. I'm going to tell it to you. All right.
Right. And if you can't sleep, if you're tossing and turning and you just can't get to sleep, sometimes it's best to just get out of bed for a little bit until you can tire yourself out, maybe read a book or meditate or listen to some soft music or something like that until you get sleepy again, then get back in the bed. But sometimes when you're having insomnia and you're wrestling around, that can actually make you more anxious the next night of sleep. And so if you can't sleep, you tried and you just can't sleep. Sometimes it's good to just get up for a little bit until you're sleepy and then get back in the bed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to one of the sleep experts, and they were making the point. They kind of changed how I viewed this in the past that you lay there and, you try to go back to sleep. And they literally say, if you can't get back to sleep, within 10 or 15 minutes to get out of bed and move away from the bed. One of their reasons behind that is that if you constantly have insomnia and it's always an issue, the brain starts to see the bed as
As
an
an
issue.
issue.
Right?
Right.
So get up and move away from that bed until you're sleepy again and then come back to the bed. I think that's so important for people to get because we're later watching the clock and,
Mhm.
and just getting all anxious, particularly if you have something to do the next day, which also brings up another point that we didn't cover, something called restless mind syndrome. So even if you've never heard that term before, you kind of get what we're talking about, where you're overwhelmed with life. We talked about that, a lot of things going on, you're stressed and everything that's annoying you or you're dealing with in life shows up in the middle of the night.
That's right.
You're chewing the world's woes in the middle of the night, right? But you can't sleep.
Right.
So what sleep specialists recommend you to do, so try this, is to sit a notepad by the bed. For you young people, pull out your phone or something that don't have blue light where you can actually record. Sleep specialists say if you can get that information out your brain and give the brain a backup, it'll let that information go. It's kind of interesting when I was writing my book, I literally started doing that because some of my best ideas and thoughts came in the middle of the night. And so I would literally sit a notepad by my bed and wake up and start writing. I woke up one morning and I'm making up the bed and I glanced over at my pad and I noticed I had written something on the pad. I grabbed the pad and started to read. I had written 5 pages for my book and
Wow.
I was on the third page before I remember writing it. So
Wow.
clearly, if I hadn't written it down, I would have
Yes,
forgotten it.
that's
So the
great.
brain is trying to save those things that are most important. So try it. I know it sounds crazy, but put that notepad by the bed. That's something can help to get information out of your head and somewhere where you can store it for later use.
And pick it up in the morning.
Yeah, there you go.
Also, it's important to have a wind down routine. And so, whatever that means, whether it's, flossing, brushing, washing your face, take some people like to shower at nighttime, whatever you do, reading a little book, whatever you do, try to stay consistent because eventually, when your body gets used to that routine, even if you're not sleepy, if you start going through those habits, your body will start to get sleepy. Kind of like we do with our kids, right? We give
Yeah,
them a bath, we read them a story. You can't do it out of order because they'll call you on it, right? And
absolutely.
so we need to treat ourselves like we treat our children and creating that wind down routine. I also want to bring up one other resource. And so sometimes people use the white noise machine
Yes.
or they'll use soft music, right? But one thing that can happen is you can get intrusive thoughts that come into your brain at night. And so sometimes those things can keep you awake. And so what the sleep specialists actually recommend is things like counting sheep, for example. You
Oh,
want
interesting.
something that will capture your attention, bore you to death, and then
Literally.
take you to sleep, right? There's another thing I'll recommend. There's some of these podcasts. Now, I'll mention this one in particular because I found it to be very helpful and I've recommended it to a lot of patients is Sleep With Me
Yeah,
podcast.
I heard that.
It's a podcast where the guy, he talks in this really low, monotonous voice. It's very boring. And he just meanders and goes off track and just rambles and rambles and rambles. But when you try to follow him, it captures your attention,
Yeah,
and then he bores you so much that you fall asleep,
yeah,
and so that's been really helpful for me and for a lot of my patients, but
yeah.
any of the podcasts that do that sort of thing captures your attention, bores you, or you wanna read a boring journal or listen to a boring journal, something like that is
Yeah.
good as
Yeah.
well.
There's a lot of podcasts out there that are wonderful. And the premise is that idea you listen to something that engages you just of a level of intrigue, but not enough
Yes,
to keep you awake. You do not
right.
want to watch some kind of horror movie
Right.
before bed, right? You
No.
want to watch something or listen to something that really soothing and relaxing for
That's
you.
it.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also stress management. So meditating before you go to bed, trying to manage your stress. We can't change stress or eliminate stress from our lives,
Yeah.
but we can change how we react to it. And just, making sure that you're taking care of yourself. Self care is so important. Noticing when you're getting stressed. I know when I get stressed, I start snapping at people. And usually when I snap at two people in a row, that's the time I'm like, okay, I need to check myself.
Oh,
Something's
absolutely.
going on. I need to
Absolutely.
go get a massage. I need a vacation, something like that. And so recognize when you're having stress and being able to manage that stress because that will help your sleep as well.
Yeah. It's so many different factors to getting a good night's sleep, isn't it?
It is.
And it really is about paying attention to it.
That's
'Cause
right.
I think sometimes we just move through life just not even being aware of how important sleep is, not taking the time to get ready for sleep, not realizing that staying up half of the night is not good for you. And I'm hoping that what we talked about today can be game changers for a lot of you with helping you to realize the importance of sleep and making sure that you try to get this thing on track. And I'm gonna try to be one of those. I am doing better. I'm doing so much better. My husband tells me I do pretty good, but because of all I know, I'm like, I'm still falling a little short. I'm still falling a little short, right? But so much about sleep is it's a needed conversation. It's a needed conversation in our community because you staying up all night and being everything to everyone else and not getting to
Mm,
sleep, you do not deserve a badge of honor, right? It is not something we should
mhm.
celebrate. And
That's
we
right.
need to say that out loud. Go to bed, particularly women, my sisters, go to bed.
And so now that you know how important sleep is, it's important for us to be intentional and be intentional about it and go to bed.
That's the bottom line is to go to bed.
That's right.
I'm so excited about this topic because I hope if we can help one person, it's a game changer. Note all we've talked about. Sleep is so imperative to your idea of living long and well. Please do not excuse it as something that not important and you can get to it some nights and some nights you can't. Put is just as much emphasis on sleep as you do everything else. I'm here, even as a nutrition specialist and a diabetes specialist, to say to you, sleep is more important than those things. Because think about it. I can go without eating right. I can go without exercising. How long can you go without sleep? If God meant for you not to get to sleep, we would have figured out a way to get around it. That is one we cannot get around. If you go a long time without sleep, it will ruin everything about you.
And good sleep is preventative health care. So it protects you from heart disease, it protects your brain, it protects your metabolism, regulates your metabolism, it regulates your hormones and your overall emotional well being. So protect your sleep like your life depends on it because it really does.
Like your life depending on it. And I have to put in one more little plug for my patients with diabetes. I tell you all the time when you get up in the morning, you can't figure out why your blood sugar is elevated. Ask yourself, how many hours of sleep did you get? They're always fascinated by the fact that the mornings when they don't get enough sleep, their blood sugar is through the roof. It affects everything, people. Hear what we're saying to you. Make sleep a priority.
Well, thank you, Sharon. I think we hopefully helped somebody today.
Think
And
so.
I'd say you helped me today. So thank you for that. I actually
Y'all
learned
help.
something. I always learn something,
Yeah, we always
I
learn
always
something
learn
from each other.
something. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Exactly.
And we're so excited once again to be able to share with you all. And we will be here for you for upcoming segments. So please join us for this podcast as we work to make you better as a woman. And even you men are out there who are watching. We're here for you because we are
The
the Be
Be Well
Well
Sistas.
Sisters.